בשם השם נעשה ונצליח. שיעור תורה, ברוכים הבאים, שבוע טוב. We are starting a new week and at the same time completing a monumental work that, Baruch Hashem, we've been studying together for nearly 4.5 years together. The Jewish Hashkafa series based on the extraordinary Sefer by the Chazon Ish, Rabbeinu the Chazon Ish, Alav Shalom, the Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and literally the our teacher and guide in every move of Hashkafa over these last 4.5 years that we've toiled over every word that he wrote in his Sefer. And we're here to, BeEzrat HaShem, learn together the final segment, the final shiur of this Jewish Hashkafa series, Baruch Hashem. Tonight's shiur is for the Atzlacha Rabbah and Refuah Shlema for our own very dear Rabbi Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Zara bat Anat, Rabbanit Levana bat Zara, Sarah bat Levana, Ovadia ben Levana, Yosef ben Levana, Avi Mori David ben Nesriya, Imi Morati Doris bat Zora, and also a very kind sponsorship by a dear friend, the Diana Acosta family. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless them with bracha, atzlacha, ve'maasim tovim. And thank you to all of you that have been watching and learning with us this series and all of the other lectures that we've been doing over the past decade or so. But this particular series has literally been nearly half of the last decade. We've been studying this particular book about Jewish Hashkafa, which now more than ever is needed as we see the world becoming more and more confused, more and more similar to what we actually have been reading in the books for all of these years. So Baruch Hashem that we got here, but we're not finished yet. This particular lecture is certainly not going to be able to sum up everything we've learned throughout the last 140 or so lectures, but it certainly would put that exclamation point on everything that we've learned, especially when a person takes what the Chazon Ish wrote many decades ago, what the sages wrote hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and what the Torah Kedusha itself has in it literally over 3,000 years ago, and you put this all up together and you see what we're living in today is nothing new. And in fact, it's something that is old news, but nonetheless, that doesn't make it any less difficult. One of the big issues that we see today is, of course, you look at the news, if it's not discussing the war and the attacks, it's by the Hamas and the terrorists and Iran and all of the countries that hate the Jews now. If it's not that, then you're actually seeing the real war at hand, which is the war against the Torah. The war against the Torah, and unfortunately, the anti-Semitism in the world, something that we're discussing a lot more in our other new series that we started, which is the War of Amalek, based on the writings of Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman. But you're seeing that the war against the Torah is picking up, and it's more than what we're used to seeing. Everyone that's been in the religious world for some time knows that there's been a war against the Torah pretty much since we received the Torah. But what we've become accustomed to, what we've, in so many words, have become numb to, is no longer something that we're dealing with. Rather, we're seeing a new war against the Torah and taking on a new face, a new chapter, a new weapon each and every single day. And who's better than the Chazon Ish that is going to teach us how to deal with all of this? Because a person can say, listen, I want to be religious, I am religious, but what can I do that I'm surrounded by wicked people. I'm alone, surrounded by wicked people. Whether those wicked people are the anti-Semites, marching, with all types of slogans that call for the annihilation of Israel, and all of the Jews that are even outside of Israel, or it is the wicked people that are in the Jewish community that will sometimes be more hateful towards the Torah than even the anti-Semites, or it's even the wicked people in somebody's household. So a person can say, listen, I want to be righteous. I want to be good. I want to fight for Hashem. I want to fight for Torah, but I'm surrounded by wicked people. What can I do? I'm alone. Well, don't fear, my son. The Chazon Ish is going to teach us that you're not alone. And in fact, your situation is not even unique. And that is one of the things that a person must realize right from the get-go, because the moment you think that your situation is unique, the moment you think that your situation is new, at that moment you have decided to fail. Because if it is new, if it is unique, then it does not have a solution, an ancient solution from the Holy Torah. But if it's not new, and in fact, if many of the sages have discussed it, and not only that, our forefathers dealt with it with much greater difficulty than you are dealing with it right now, then perhaps the solution is there. Because the only real purpose for history is for us to learn our lessons, even though the average person doesn't really want to learn from his parents. He wants to learn on his own skin. He doesn't want to learn from the old man. He wants to learn from his new and ambitious young life. He doesn't want to learn from the ancients. He wants to learn from the newer, the reformed, the modern. But obviously these are all foolish decisions. Anyone that has even an ounce of wisdom in them, even an aspiration to have wisdom, knows that if you want to have wisdom, if you want to have success, then you must learn from history. And even more so from Jewish history, from Jewish teachings, from the Holy Torah. So today, when we received a horrible notice in the shiur by our own dear Rabbi Ephraim, protesting against a religious newspaper in Israel that had a caricature demonizing the religious community. But not just the religious community as a whole, rather demonizing the Avrahim, the Torah scholars. And again, if this came from the lefty liberals of the Haaretz or all of the other lefty liberal papers that are more pro-Hamas than they are pro-Jews, then, this would not even be discussed. It's expected. But when this is coming from what's supposed to be a religious newspaper, a religious organization, then, they call themselves, Dati Leumi, the Zionist / religious, the religious Zionists, which we've talked about that there are some among them that are very good, righteous people and have a very different definition to Zionism. And then there's, of course, the wicked Reshaim that are worse than even the people that are, marching for Hamas. Because they're pretending to be righteous, they're pretending to be religious, but in reality, they're against the Torah. And this is one of them. This is one of these examples, where you see them making a picture of the Israeli soldiers, and one of them in the front has a tzitzit, so it's in essence indicating that, of course, you can be religious but still in the army. But that's not the worst of it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There are religious people in the Israeli army. That's not necessarily a new thing. But rather, they're showing somebody on a over here being carried, injured or dead. But there is a Torah scholar with a book telling the soldiers, don't worry. The learning that I'm doing right now is for his refuah shlema, for his good health. In so many words, they're having a Torah scholar sit on top of an injured soldier saying, listen, don't worry, I'm still learning Torah for his health. As if the Torah scholars are practically an enemy of the Jewish people, that the Torah does not protect its people. And in fact, the Torah is taking advantage of the people. Now, if you would have seen this in Nazi Germany, then it wouldn't be a surprise. And in fact, some people that have seen this, that have some common sense, asked them, is there a German translation to this? Because this seems very similar to what we saw in Nazi Germany. But of course, unfortunately, this is what's happening in the world. This is something that's coming out. And when you're surrounded by a world that has many, many wicked people of all shapes and sizes. Some are Jews, some are Gentiles. Some are black, some are white. Some are tall, some are short. Some are male, some are female. Some are young, some are old. Some live in Israel, some live outside of Israel. In so many words, they're in all places, all sizes. A person has to know that the war is significant, and it may very well be very close to home or even inside their home. And if you do not know how to deal with this, then certainly you're already at a point where you are losing. So the Chazon Ish has taught us the key details and mechanics of the Jewish mind and how the ideology of a Jew is supposed to look like. Now, of course, many non-Jews that are righteous Noahides that have been learning with us over the last several years, specifically in this particular series, have benefited tremendously from it, because the advice that you get here and the guidance and the teachings that the Chazon Ish is teaching us is certainly applicable to people of all walks of life. But the point being here is that we have to know what to do in a world that we're living in a world that seems new, that seems like this is the worst we've ever seen, a world that seems like I've never seen it this bad. Every other day you hear somebody saying this is the worst generation, or the tests we have in this generation are the worst, or this is a especially weak generation, or no one has ever seen such suffering or such difficulties. You know, there's always these, I don't know if I want to call it exaggerated, but in some cases they are exaggerated statements, because when you're saying this is the worst thing that Am Yisrael has ever seen, then you really are minimizing the travesty that we've endured over the last several thousand years. The destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, the first one, the second one, the pogroms, the inquisitions. But even aside from all of those main tragedies, everything that transpired before them, that brought the tragedy. So to say that this is the worst we've ever seen, really, it's hard to really imagine that anybody could really say that with some clarity. Because if you look at what our holy books say about what happened back then, you would say, listen, we've seen this before. We survived Paro, we'll survive this. The question is, who's going to survive? It's not a matter of whether we're going to survive. It's not a matter of whether the Torah is going to survive. That is a certainty. That is a promise from HaKadosh Baruch Hu as he swears on his own name. The question is who? Who will have the proper ideology, the proper hashkafa needed in order to survive? Now, in the last lecture in this series that we discussed in the 6th chapter, in the third segment of it, where the Chazon Ish was talking about how, this whole concept or foundational belief that we have in prophecy, but of course, it's not in order for us to learn how to be prophets, even though it's anything is a possibility if a person follows the instructions. But the point being is that here the Chazon Ish is trying to tell us where we've been, why we were much more likely to be prophets at the time of Adam Rishon, at the time of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the time of the tribes, the 12 tribes, at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, why everyone was a prophet back then, and how there was a severe degradation of the generations, over these last several thousand years, ultimately getting to a point where 2,000 years ago, Hashem decided that there's not going to be any more prophecy gifted to people in the same fashion as it was in the past. There are bits of prophecy given to people that have all types of mental illnesses or children even, but there are Ruach HaKodesh, there are different things that we still do have, and a person that has really learned this series is not really worried so much about the whether they do have prophecy or not, or even whether to acquire prophecy or not. Really, a person that has their eyes open and in their head is simply going to look at things of, how do I survive the situation that I'm in? Forget about being a prophet. Forget about being the biggest scholar in the world. Forget about everything. How do I survive mentally, spiritually, and even physically in this world that every other day unfolds another layer of tumah, getting us closer and closer to the 50th level of tumah that the Or Chaim HaKadosh said we had to get to before the end, before Mashiach arrives. And every day it seems like we've reached the 50th level of tumah until the following day comes and something else happens. So the Chazon Ish has been telling us that yes, Adam HaRishon, the first human, was created as a perfect human being, very, very different physically and spiritually than any of us could ever imagine. But he lowered himself as a result of his actions. But that still was much more significant than we could imagine, and even his son, Cain, that committed the first murder, still had prophecy that he was able to speak to God. And after that murder, of course, he was lowered, but still was a vessel fit to speak to Hashem. 10 generations passed from Adam until Noach, and the situation in the world deteriorated until HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to destroy the world, leaving only Noach, his wife, Naamah, who was one of the descendants of Cain, and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefet, and their wives. And the world, in essence, had to restart. This is the reason why at Mount Sinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu officially made Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, into a nation. Before that, we were Bnei Yisrael, we were the sons of Israel, sons of Yaakov. Then we became Am Yisrael, which is also called the Jews, Jewish people. While the rest of the world are called Noahides. Why Noahides? Because everyone that's in the world today, Jews and Gentiles alike, are from Noach. And they're called Noahides rather than Adamites. Because even though everything started from Adam, it was all destroyed and restarted from Noach. And all of the nations come from Noach's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. And of course, the Jewish people come from Shem, which we'll discuss further why that is significant today. Now, after 10 generations of idol worship, immorality, and despicable behavior becoming the behavior across the board, all over the world, and Hashem decided to destroy the world. The generation of Noach, says the Chazon Ish, came and went. And the generations after him lost their understanding and knowledge and deteriorated to the level of animals. As the Mishnah in Masechet Avot says, 10 generations from Noach to Avraham came and enraged their creator, meaning they did not fulfill man's purpose in the world, and the entire world was like an empty vessel, unwanted, expected to return to chaos until Avraham Avinu appeared and lit up the world, washing away the filth of the generation, removing the imperfections, revealing spiritual beauty. The wisdom of the generation illuminated it. Everyone recognized the secret of the world, the secret of the soul of man created in God's image and likeness, forsaking the pleasures of human beings, basking in the glow of wisdom, learning 400 chapters in the Tractate of Avodah Zara that was taught to them by Avraham in his wisdom. Avraham converting the men, and Sarah, his wife, converting the women. Since then, the learning of Torah has not ceased. Avraham passed it on to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak to Yaakov. And Yaakov studied for 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem and Evel, and passed his Torah to his sons. Yaakov Avinu and his sons went down to Egypt, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence, went with them, as it said in the Gemara, Masechet Megillah, page 29a. That is, that the Jewish nation merited to perceive the Shekhinah, to raise themselves above the inhibiting habits, and to delight in the pleasure of Hashem's presence. Now, although the Chazon Ish certainly intended to write more than this, we could certainly understand what he wrote here and build on it, and also, if we dare, extrapolate from all of the teachings that we've learned from him, from other sages, to perhaps give a imagery of what it could look like if we wore the great hat of the Chazon Ish for half a second. Not that we are like him, not that we're even a grain of sand under his feet, but again, when you learn from someone for so long, you understand the direction of where things are going. And we can build on everything that we've learned. But first, let's understand what we've actually read, as we have done over the last 4.5 years. The generation of Noach, the Chazon Ish says, came and went. Meaning that the generation of Noach, when they were here, they were powerful, they were extraordinarily wealthy, extraordinarily healthy. The average person was living in hundreds of years. If you look at the end of the book of Genesis, the end of the Parashat Bereshit, in the first parasha of the Torah, starts talking about the ages, and then you go at the end of Parashat Noach, furthermore, goes into the ages of how long everyone lived. You see that literally people lived 800, 900 years. There was no sickness in the world. Giants were walking among society like it was normal. There was the Nephilim, the Anakim, all types of things that ignorant people like to have all types of conspiracy theories about. There's no conspiracy. Torah clearly says there was giants in many places in the Torah, and it didn't end at the time of Noah. It continued even at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. We had Am Yisrael go to Canaan, to the land of Israel, and they said they saw the Nephilim over there, the Anakim, which were the descendants of the Nephilim. So there was clearly giants. Now when people say, well, if there were giants, how come we haven't found the bones? Simply, the answer is, there's a lot of things we haven't found, because the world is huge. There are things that could very well be buried under your own house that you're not aware of. There are things that are not even buried under your house. There could literally be things inside your house that you're not aware of, that perhaps your spouse is hiding from you, that perhaps your kids are hiding from you. There are plenty of things that we're not aware of, that are literally right under our nose. And just because people are looking doesn't mean that they've looked everywhere. We haven't even literally scratched the surface in archaeology and all of the people that are digging everywhere. To find anything is not something so simple like people think, oh, because it's big. The world is much bigger. We're still discovering new species. We're still discovering new places. There's still many, many places in the world that have not even seen the modern technology for even a moment, because no one has gone there. But needless to say, anyone that is familiar with the desert and the Amazon, and just in essence, just the area of the world where many of the things that are in the Torah take place, different parts of Africa, different parts of the Middle East over there, you're talking about a massive amount of land that we have not even scratched the surface in looking into anything. Most of the efforts that are spent today in archaeology and in all of the historical documenting is based on things that are easy to find or already, out in the open. And people spend their entire lives, decades of years, just studying what we already have. So, anyway, the fact that we haven't found giants doesn't really mean anything. Secondly, who says we haven't? Just because it's not, being modeled in your local museum doesn't necessarily mean that people haven't found it. There are certain people that have seen it. In fact, in the Gemara, written nearly 1,600 years ago, there are several accounts of different sages that discussed seeing these literally walking in, next to them, next to the bones, next to the fossils, next to all of this. Now, if a person chooses to ignore the Talmud, ignore the oral Torah, ignore the document, the best and clearest and most authentic documentation of human history, and then simply reject everything that the Torah says at the same time, then obviously you can't help such a person. Either way, we're seeing that the generation of Noah was not like today in a sense of the iPhones and iPads and technology, but were very much the same in many other aspects of humanity. The immorality, the people deciding that they're going to redefine marriage, people stealing, and that becoming the pretty much the standard, as unfortunately has become today. It's a stealing in business is very much, it's not even an elephant in the room. It's widely discussed and done excessively. If you're not stealing, then you're doing apparently something wrong in the business world, because apparently that's the way to get ahead according to society. You're seeing all of the major corporations that are the ones that you buy their phones and their cars and their whatever it is. Every so often they have to pay fines. Every so often they have to, go to court, deal with lawsuits. Why? Because they're stealing. They're stealing information, they're stealing patents, they're stealing products, they're stealing all types of things. But because they're so big and so massive, and in essence necessary to the economy because they employ so many people, all they have to do is just, write a big check and just move on with their life. But stealing is expected, accepted, unless you can't afford to steal, meaning you can't afford to get caught. But small businesses, big businesses, friends, family, every day there are cases upon cases where people got caught stealing. If you could afford it, that means you could do it again. If you can't afford it, that means you'll have to pay in different ways, and then you could do it again. Simple. That's society for you. This is not new. Torah tells us clearly that at the time of Noach, stealing became standard, so much so that people could not even prosper in just to provide for themselves, because as soon as they put a sack of nuts out there to sell, people say, okay, can I test it to see before I want to buy something? Sure. He takes one, and then he tells his friend, everybody starts taking one. Nobody wants to buy. Everybody takes one. Before he knows it, the entire community came to try it, not because they really want to buy it, but because they want to take something free until they empty out the whole bag. So that's why there are laws in the Torah of what you're allowed to try, what you're allowed to test. You can't just go into a perfume store with no intention whatsoever to ever buy anything just to get some free perfume. That's considered stealing. The immorality at the time of Noach we've discussed many times, where it was so tragic and disgusting that the filth of people affected the air to the extent where even the animals started going interspecies. The lion wanted to marry the sheep. The sheep wanted to marry the zebra. The zebra wanted to marry a raccoon, and all types of things that are against nature, against the way the world was created. But everyone knew that this is the opposite of what good is. Everyone knew that this is the opposite of the will of Hashem. There were no atheists. Everyone knew God created the world. They just simply felt that they don't need to listen to God. They could just do whatever they want, however they want, because they're so powerful and they're so big and no one ever gets sick. There's no cancer. There's no AIDS. There's no STDs. There's no coughs. Nothing. People live for hundreds of years until one day the guy sneezes and he dies on the spot. Until then, he never got sick. He never even got a common cold. There was no coronavirus. There's no vaccine. There was no pharmaceuticals back then. So everyone felt like, why should I do tshuva? And even if I'm going to do tshuva, even if I'm going to repent for the bad things that I did, I'll do it, next year. Or maybe not even next year. I'll do it in 100 years from now. Since I'm still young. I'm only 300 years old. I'm only 300 years old. I still got a long time. My father lived till 950. Still got a long time, so I could still go and do whatever I want for another 300-400 years easy. And that was the mentality. People took the gift that God gave them and used it against God. And this is not so different than today, where you see many people take the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them, the exorbitant amount of money, the exorbitant amount of comfort, luxury, freedom, access to all types of things, and instead of utilizing it to publicize the name of the Creator that gave it to you, instead of using that to serve the Creator that gave it to you, what do people do? They make websites against God. They start worshiping idols. They start doing things that God specifically said not to do. And redefining the law, saying, listen, He said no, but I say yes. And no one thinks that the end is near and no one thinks that they're going to get caught. And even if they're going to get caught, everyone thinks that they are clever enough to get out of it. And the generation of Noach was the same. And the Chazon Ish says that the generation of Noach came and went. Came and went, meaning they were here, they're gone. The only thing we have about them is simply the story. The story of an entire civilization of people that were gifted above and beyond and lost. There's no writings from them. There's no memories of them. Nothing else. All of the wealth and power that they built for themselves, gone with the flood. The same as what's going to happen to all of the people that are going against God today. So he built a tower. He built 5 towers. He has a real estate company. He has a conglomerate. He has all types of things. Yes, he does. But one day, Hashem will separate him from those things. He doesn't have to get all of those things to go to zero. He could just have him go to zero. And give those buildings and that company and those products and those ideas to simply somebody else, perhaps even his enemy. And what about this person? Gone. He won't even be a distant memory. They won't even keep his picture on the wall. They rather put the new owner's pet dog on the wall. Picture of him wearing a scarf. So, while everyone thinks that they're going to live forever and lives their life as if they're going to live forever, focusing on accumulating more and more stuff that they're never going to use and never going to need, and forgetting about achieving their purpose, this is not a new thing. The generation of Noach did the same thing. And Chazon Ish says they lost their understanding and knowledge and deteriorated to the level of animals. What does it mean to deteriorate to the level of animals? Rabbi Ephraim says that years ago, he went to a zoo. In the zoo, he was confused when he got to the area where the monkeys are. Because apparently there was a fight among the monkeys. Because one of the monkeys was married to his mother. And then the mother was also married to one of the other brothers. And in so many words, these monkeys had this incestual relationship that caused them to fight constantly. And every one of them had a human name attached to it. But what can you expect from a bunch of monkeys, other than mamzerim, other than them doing whatever animals do? The problem is that in a society today that is promoting Satanism, atheism, and all types of other isms that are declaring war against God on a regular basis, the same outcome is happening. You see, those very same people that promote Darwinism and the different versions of it that are coming out, we came from monkeys, we came from amoebas, we came from whatever, what you're also seeing is that those very same people are the people that are justifying all types of immorality in the world. Where all of a sudden, why is it a problem for him to marry his mother, or marry his sister, or marry a child, or do all types of things that are, according to all conservative, normal people, all people that have a belief in God, this should never be. But to the atheistic, Darwinistic, and all types of other istic mentality, if they haven't gotten there, they are getting there. Why? Because if you came from a monkey, if you believe that you came from a monkey, and the monkey is allowed to marry his mother, and the monkey is allowed to marry her father or her brother, whoever it is, because they're monkeys, what's the difference between you and the monkey? technically, you should learn from your forefathers if you think you came from an amoeba or a monkey or whatever it is. And that's actually what's happening. That's what's happening in the world today, where you have all types of so-called scholars in the secular world going on TED Talks and all types of other scholarship speeches and lectures, trying to justify all that is forbidden, trying to justify all that is immoral. Instead of calling pedophilia a crime, they're saying it's a preference. And literally justifying everything that God says is forbidden. And this is happening on a massive scale. Now, of course, those that are unaware are going to say, nah, come on, he's exaggerating, until you start looking and you realize that it is happening on a massive scale all over the world. Literally, the things that we've discussed in issues of immorality, when we made the film, Tikkun Abrit, and when we discussed those lectures about Parashat Kedoshim in an event a few years ago, as bad as they were back then, they've gotten even worse since. And the point is that the generation of Noach deteriorated to the level of animals. Why? Because they abandoned the teachings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was available to them. Adam HaRishon spoke to God. Noach spoke to God. These were not people that didn't have any source of truth. The source of truth was readily available to anyone who wanted it. There wasn't a lack of belief. No one thought that they came from an amoeba. No one thought that they came from a monkey. Everyone knew who God was and what he did. But they just simply didn't want to listen because they wanted to follow their desires. And that's why when people come to me, and unfortunately every day there's a new person that comes with a new tragic story of how one of their friends or family members, they believe that they're possessed. They believe that somebody is deciding for them. They believe that they're being controlled because suddenly they're doing all types of wicked things. They're doing all types of, heinous things that are not like who they are. No, you're not understanding. They don't need to have a dibuk. They don't need to be possessed. They don't need to, have some type of foreign entity control them in order for them to do wicked things. All they need to do is just simply abandon God, abandon the Torah, and it's only a matter of time before they will do the worst possible things known to man. The more a person follows their desires, the more they satiate their desires and get themselves used to giving themselves whatever they desire, the more they will end up desiring. This is feeding the monster. The monster is never satiated. The more you feed it, the more hungry it becomes. Just like Rabbi Yochanan said, there's a small member in a man's body. If you starve it, you will be satiated forever. But if you feed it, you will never be satiated. This is in the issues of morality. The same thing that Shlomo HaMelech says. Dvash matzata echol dayeka. If you found honey, he's referring to a woman, eat only a little bit, meaning don't be together every time, every day. Don't be a rooster. Why? If you are together too much, eventually you'll be disgusted. If you spend every single minute of your day with your spouse, eventually you're not even going to want to eat together. You're not even going to want to hold hands. You're not going to want to even look at each other. Why? Too much. Too much of anything that's material is going to end up being bad. The same thing as if somebody had a favorite food. Let's say it was like Shlomo HaMelech uses dvash. Dvash is honey. Honey is delicious for people that like honey. But if you give those very same people that love honey all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, nothing else, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like this week's parasha. Parashat Ba'alotecha, Am Yisrael is complaining about meat. They want meat. Hashem says, no problem, you're going to have meat. But you're not going to have meat just for one day. You can have meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not for just a day, not for just this week, not for just this a couple of weeks. You're going to have it for a whole month. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Non-stop meat. Eventually, they literally had meat coming out of their nose. They hated meat. No, everyone wanted to become a vegan. Vegan, vegetarian. But it was a punishment. So even if somebody likes honey, if they eat too much of it, eventually they'll throw up. The generation of Noach deteriorated to the level of animals because they abandoned the Torah. They abandoned the teachings that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made available in the world. They had ready available access to a prophet, to Noach, to his children. No one doubted whether God existed or not. But they abandoned because they wanted to follow their desires. 10 generations from Noach to Avraham came and enraged the Creator. Even after Hashem destroyed the world, the next 10 generations continued the same wicked behavior that the generation of Noach was doing, and even worse in some cases. Idolatry, to the extent where just 360 years later, after the flood, Nimrod spearheaded a project, worldwide project, building the Tower of Babel, a tower that can go and be used to declare war against God. Meaning, they weren't atheists. They're obviously declaring war against someone they believe in. But they didn't want God. They wanted to declare war. Now, of course, all of us are looking in hindsight and seeing how stupid these people are. But the reality is, Rabotai, there are many people doing the same thing today. They may not be building a tower with an ultimate intention to go and throw spears at the sky, but they're doing things that are much, much worse. By declaring war against the Torah, declaring war against those that learn Torah, those that serve Hashem. And the Chazon Ish continues and tells us that this 10 generations between Noach and Avraham, these 10 generations between Noach and Avraham did not fulfill man's purpose in the world. And the entire world was like an empty vessel, unwanted, expected to return to chaos, until Avraham Avinu appeared and lit it up. Now, before we go into Avraham Avinu, we have to delve a little bit more into what the Chazon Ish is saying here about man not fulfilling the purpose of the world, the purpose of man in the world. One of my dear Talmidim sent me a letter by the biggest rabbi today, in one of the biggest in the world, and certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest gadol in America, Rav Aaron Feldman. And the Rosh Yeshiva, Shichyeh, which I spoke to once years ago in our fight against the heretics that invite missionaries to synagogues, he speaks to the point. And despite his extensive experience in many years, he has not slowed down for even a moment. And he recently published a letter that he calls a message from the master designer, in response to all of the people that, whether they're religious or non-religious Jews, are asking the question that is an old question. Where was God during the Holocaust? But now they've renewed it and saying, where was God during October 7th? Why did he allow it to happen? And he wrote this recently, and we'll see that from the letter itself. It's a little lengthy, but it's certainly worth reading it. There's only one way to describe the events which took place in Israel on Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah on October 7th, and that is that on that day, God intervened in the workings of the world and sent a message to the Jews of Israel. If not for divine intervention, how else can one explain how on that day Hamas forces were able to massacre over 1,000 Jews and wound many times that number, pillage and destroy tens of settlements, and take over 300 men and women and children and infants as hostages? A massive wall separated Gaza from Israel, equipped with sophisticated electronic devices able to detect any attempt at tampering. Surveillance towers supervised any activity within the wall. Israel controlled the airspace with fighter bombers and armed helicopters. It had a well-trained army with tanks and armored vehicles to respond to any attempt at invasion. The only equipment available to Arab forces was motorcycles and trucks. Yet, despite all this, Hamas forces were able to dismantle the electronic devices, amass tractors to breach the wall, and invade southern Israel with hundreds of heavily armed troops moving on motorcycles. The warnings of the surveillance post of military activity in Gaza were not taken seriously. The Air Force was not called into action, and it took 4 hours, and in some places 8 hours, for Israeli forces to counterattack. By that time, Hamas forces had wreaked havoc and death on southern Israel. Israel was shaken to its core. The unimaginable had transpired. The army, which was the basis of their security, had failed them. It also became chillingly clear that if at the same time the Hezbollah had invaded the north and the Arabs in the occupied territories had decided on an uprising, this would have caused widespread devastation and loss of life of unspeakable dimensions. The nation suddenly felt vulnerable, weak, and without confidence in its survival. What transpired was unimaginable, and to this day no one has explained how it happened. For in truth, there is no reasonable explanation. The only explanation is that the hand of God orchestrated the failings of the army and brought devastation to the Jews of Israel. It was God speaking to his people. We have no prophets to tell us the exact words of that message, but based on the words of the Torah and other prophecies, it's likely ran something like the following. For over 75 years, here the Rav Aaron Feldman is in essence telling us this is what, in essence, if a prophet was here telling us what's happening and why everything happened, this is what he would say. For over 75 years, you have created a state on my land with an educational system, institutes for scientific research, industry, commerce, agriculture, and general prosperity. But you omitted one element from your state. You deliberately left me out of the picture. I chose the Jews at Mount Sinai to be a nation of servants and a holy people. This meant that they were to be a nation devoted to me in every aspect of their lives. For this I gave them a Torah, where I commanded them to have tzitzit on their clothing, tefillin on their heads, mezuzot on their doorposts. I wanted them to testify to my existence on Shabbat and on the holidays, to refrain from eating food that dampened their yearning for sanctity, to refrain from slander and evil tongue, to support the poor, and to devote themselves to the study of Torah. All of this to overcome their selfish drives for lust and power, and to turn them into a holy people. To ensure that they remain a holy nation, I gave them a land where they would be able to flourish in their devotion to me without the influence of the nations of the world. The Jewish nation was my hope for mankind. I created the world so that mankind will overcome evil and accept me as their sovereign. The instrument for reaching this goal would be my nation. When the proper time arrives, I will appear to them in all my glory, and all of mankind will then recognize that man was created to devote himself to my service. Because the Jewish nation is crucial to carrying out my plans for the world, I watched over them and protected them throughout the ages from the nations of the world who sought to devour them. But you decided to thwart my plans. You decided to use my land to remake Jews into a nation like the nations of the world. You wanted Jews to be like them and live for the fulfillment of their appetites, and to make wealth and military conquest the apex of their glory. You wanted Jews to forget that they were meant to be a holy nation. I have tried repeatedly to warn you of the evil of your ways. I sent you the Yom Kippur War, the missiles of Saddam Hussein, the Intifada, the Gaza missile attacks, and sundry other messages to show you cannot build a Jewish nation and leave me out. But none of these warnings were to any avail. I became mostly concerned lately when you demonstrated for 3 months against me, when generals announced their resignation, when professors signed petitions, when your wealthy donated millions for advertisements and demonstrators to block the streets. I know the demonstrations were ostensibly against judicial reform, to retain the right of the Supreme Court to override the Knesset, but I also know that for most of you, the demonstrations were aimed at my Torah, to ensure that the Supreme Court would block any intrusion of religion into your society. I was more concerned on this last Yom Kippur, when many shuls in Tel Aviv emptied out into Dizengoff Square for the Neilah services, a time when the heart of whoever identifies as a Jew turns to me in devotion. Tens of your citizens broke up the services with punching, shoving, and slogan shouting. What was most disturbing is that afterwards there was an insufficient protest against this massive desecration of worship. Again, as a side note, we see the repeated offense not just by those that declare war against the Torah, but also by those that claim to be religious, claim to be loyal, but don't defend the Torah. Anytime we fight for the sake of God's glory in His name and protest against wicked people, there are always so-called religious people that tell us, God doesn't need you to fight for Him. Well, apparently He destroyed the entire Beit HaMikdash twice because we're not fighting for Him. As the prophet Jeremiah was told by Hashem Himself, if you find one synagogue, one rabbi that's actually fighting for my name, that's spreading the truth, I'll absolve the entire nation of this offense. I won't destroy the Beit HaMikdash. And the Gemara in Masechet Chagiga says that Jeremiah went from place to place, from shul to shul, from Bet Midrash to Bet Midrash, and couldn't find one rabbi that was protesting for the honor of Hashem. Everybody was concentrated on their own thing. The tuition, the regiment, the family, the feeding the poor, feeding the rich, whatever it was. Nobody was defending God's honor. Jeremiah started crying, saying, Anshe Emunah Avadu. There are no more people of truth. And that's why the Gemara Masechet Chagiga says, Hashem decided at that moment to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. In essence, the same is repeated in Gemara Masechet Shabbat. But the Rav over here, Rav Avraham Feldman, is saying that the same thing is happening right now, meaning it's not just the reformers and the haters of the Torah that are guilty here, but it's also the religious people that are guilty for not protesting against this wicked behavior. And he continues, and he says, there was insufficient protest against this massive desecration of worship. I began to fear that you might be lost to me forever as my nation. I therefore decided to wake you up with a powerful shock. I wanted you to realize that hitherto you were successful in your wars, and in building up my land, not because of your cleverness or your army, but because I watched over you and granted you success. I wanted you to see that when I removed my support for you for a moment, your cleverness disappeared and your army fell to pieces. It was a blow of love, made on the day Shmini Atzeret, which I set apart for celebrating with you as my nation. You are my children whom I love unlimitedly, but I had to unleash this disaster upon you to make you recognize that you have gone astray. Because I love you, I will not permit you to become a nation like all others. Without the Jews as a nation that lives to serve God, mankind will never reach its goal, and my plan at creation will never be realized. To make sure you got the message, I spared those Jews who have remained faithful to me. I am well aware that they have many shortcomings, but they alone remained faithful to the definition of a Jew, as my people, the people who received the Torah. The village of Tifrach, in whose yeshiva 1,000 people had gathered to celebrate Simchat Torah, danced with their Sifrei Torah throughout the day, October 7th he's referring to, without even being aware of the advance of the slaughtering enemy who, despite their original plans, decided to turn away from the settlement. The Shabbat observing kibbutzim, directly in the path of the invaders, were bypassed. The shul section of Ofakim was left untouched, while much of the rest of that town was ravaged. I could easily have brought you to your knees by having Hamas coordinate their attack with an invasion by the Hezbollah in the north and with an uprising in the territories. Your army would not have been able to handle that, even 4 hours later. But I did not wish to destroy you, only to awaken you. Similarly, 6 months hence, when Iran will send hundreds of missiles and drones to wipe you out, I will not permit a hair of your head to be harmed, and all the missiles will be destroyed. You are my beloved nation. I love and care for you as a father cares for his son, but a father cannot permit his son to sink into debauchery and corruption. He is obligated to help him extricate himself from his self-destructive ways. You are my children. And the time has come to remind you that you cannot remake my nation into another nation of the world. Until you change your ways and begin to define yourselves as Jews in their true definition, you will have to fight for your survival. The war with Hamas will never end. You cannot defeat those who do not care about life, who do not wish to live in peace, and whose only desire is to wipe you off the face of the earth. Even if you drive them out of Gaza, they will attack from some other quarter. The nations of the world will not come to your assistance. They want a world free of Jews. Jews make them feel guilty for living their lives devoted to lust and power. They are ashamed to say this openly, but to the extent that they are able to cloak their hatred in noble declarations of humanitarianism, they will encourage Hamas to defeat you. You must realize that they are not the enemy. The enemy is you yourselves, and your attempt to obliterate the Jewish people by abandoning the Torah and assimilating it into the culture of the nations of the world. Once you realize this and return to my Torah, your enemies will return to their holes and peace will reign in my land. I have confidence in you that you will come to your senses. You are, after all, the children of my beloved Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Your ancestors stood before me at Mount Sinai and declared, Naaseh v'nishma. False prophets led you astray with their fraudulent promises of security and an end to anti-Semitism if only you cease observing my Torah and become like all other nations. The time has come to reject their false prophecies and return to me. It cannot be otherwise, for you are my nation. Up to here is the extraordinary letter by Rav Aaron Feldman, in essence telling us what a prophet would be telling us if we were here at the time of the Bet HaMikdash, or if simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to bring prophecy back even for a moment. This is the same thing that the sages and the prophets have told us throughout all of the generations. There is no such thing as a punishment without sin. There is no such thing as where was God during the Holocaust? He was the one that did it. Where was God during the October 7th? He is the one that did it. The question should not be where was he? The question should be where were we before it happened? And this is in essence the same question that we are seeing was asked repeatedly throughout all of the generations. I am sure that if there were any other survivors from the generation of Noach, aside from Noach and his 3 sons, they would also ask, where was God during the flood? Where was God during the Tower of Babel? Where was God during Sodom and Gomorrah? There was always going to be people that want to deny the truth and live in a delusional mindset. Why? Because If God is the one that punished, then that means that God is the one that could heal. And if He's the one that could heal, He must have given us instructions of how to fix it. And if He gave us instructions of how to fix it, we would have to be clearly stupid not to follow those instructions, knowing the track record. So no one wants to admit their stupidity, spiritual or otherwise. So they have to somehow justify that it's not God, that it's some other foreign power. And this is one of the reasons why Avraham Avinu taught 400 chapters of idol worship in his generation. As the Chazon Ish here tells us, Avraham Avinu brought light to the world. This world was full of idol worshippers. This world was full of heretics. This world was full of people that wanted to do whatever they wanted. And Avraham Avinu appeared and lit up the world, washing away the filth of the generation, the filth that's created from idolatry, the filth that's created from immorality, the filth that's created from declaring war against God. Removing the imperfections, revealing spiritual beauty. The wisdom of the generation illuminated it. Everyone recognized the secret of the world, the secret of the soul of man, created in God's image and likeness. See here, Rabotai Karim, we are now seeing a drastic change in the world. Up until now, it was everyone for themselves. Everyone for themselves. Even at the time of Noach, if somebody came to Noach and asked him, what are you doing here? He'd say, listen, God's going to destroy the world because you guys are going against his law. Steve married Steve. Dave married Dave. You know, all of this type of things. These are against what God's law is. So he's going to destroy the world. Now, if the guy says, oh, okay, listen, I don't want to be destroyed. I want to be like you. He was welcome to do it. But Noach didn't go from community to community. He didn't go and publicize this. If somebody came to him, he would do it. And that was one of the flaws in the plan of Noach. And the world was destroyed as a result. At the time of Avraham Avinu, things changed. In 1948 from creation, not 1948 according to the Christian Gregorian calendar, but rather 1948 years after the world was created, Avraham Avinu was born. And Avraham was born into a impossible generation. The situation seemed unfixable. It wasn't that there was a bunch of small communities of decent people and then there was a lot of really bad people. Literally, the overwhelming majority of the world were wicked idol worshippers, enemies of God. Now, Avraham is alone. One of the reasons why HaKadosh Baruch Hu called him Avraham is because Avraham was on one side of the Ever and the world was on the other side. Now, he wasn't just alone, surrounded by wicked idol worshippers, giving him all the excuses in the world to just say, listen, I'll follow what God says. I won't kill anybody. I won't worship an idol. But I'm not going to do anything different than my forefathers, Noach, who just took care of his own family. I'm going to do that. He could have easily justified that. But he didn't. Avraham went from place to place. But if that wasn't enough, Avraham also fought in circumstances that are unlike what many people have today. Avraham had to deal with Nimrod. Nimrod was literally the most powerful person on the planet at the time, in money, in reputation, in fame, in power. He was a warrior. and he was the enemy of Avraham. Meaning, if you became friends with Avraham, there's a very good chance you won't survive the day. If that wasn't enough, Avraham already had a criminal record. At 3 years old, he got arrested for destroying a bunch of idols. So now you can't even get a regular job. His resume is not pristine. It's not clear. He doesn't have like a high degree and a good lineage and a good track record and some referrals. No, he's got a criminal record. People today make all excuses in the world of why they can't succeed in life because, listen, I didn't grow up in a rich neighborhood and my father's not this, my father's not that. And Avraham Avinu had a criminal record. Does it get any better than that? Or any worse than that? On top of that, he was poor. For a big part of his life, Avraham Avinu was poor. He didn't have any money. He had to go from place to place. He didn't have money to do marketing, make all types of videos, give out books. Nothing. Poor, criminal record. The most powerful person on the planet is his arch nemesis, his enemy, tried to kill him already, would be happy to kill him if he had the chance. Meaning that if you're friends of Avraham, you're an enemy of his enemy. And worst of it all, everybody is his customer of the enemy. Everybody's an idol worshiper. Meaning, it literally could not get worse. Avraham had every excuse under the sun. And if all of that was not enough, he came from an idol-worshipping family to the extent that his father, Terach, was like the Walmart of idols. Meaning, if you're going to go and publicize God's name, you're going to ruin the family business. You're going to ruin the family business. You're going to give the family a bad name. So the family, problem. Money, problem. Reputation, problem. Enemies, problem. Money, problem. Criminal record. Avraham does not stop publicizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name for even a second, despite all of the difficulties. Despite the impossible situation that is certainly more difficult than the situation that every single one of you watching today has to deal with in their community, in their household, in their city, in their country, in their society. You may have one or two or three of the things that Avraham Avinu had to deal with, but certainly you do not have all of them. Certainly you do not even have half of them, and certainly you do not have some of them at all. Because we don't live in the same circumstance. Avraham already cleared up the world of the level of filth that existed at the time. That even with all the problems we have today, it's still not as bad as it was at the time of Avraham. Meaning, we are in a much better situation to do Kiruv today, to help people get closer to Hashem today than even Avraham Avinu was. But yet Avraham Avinu did not let his circumstances justify failure. He did not let the fact that the fashion companies like Balenciaga, one of the most famous companies in the filthy fashion world today, openly says that they are worshippers of the Baal. What's the Baal? In their advertisements. They write, they are, in essence, worshipping Baal. Who's Baal? Baal is literally the enemy of God, the enemy of Am Yisrael. This is the idol that has literally caused the destruction of the Jewish people for centuries in biblical times. This is an idol that has the ultimate tum'ah of the world, was instilled into this Baal. One of the reasons why the Midrash tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu was buried by God in a specific place opposite of the mountain of where the Baal was, is in order to continuously submit the impurity of Baal. Meaning this is not just some statue like some Buddha that was created by some guy that wanted to make a statue of himself, wearing nothing but a little handkerchief, because he had nothing to do with his money, and then eventually his family threw it in the garbage, and then somebody picked it up and said, you know what, let me give this to my kid. And the kid saw it and started crying, so he threw it in the garbage, and then somebody else took it out of the garbage and said, you know what, let me try to maybe give it to my friend as a present. I don't want to spend any money on him. So he gave him the statue, and the friend said, what is this? I don't want this garbage. And he threw it in the garbage, and this went on time after time. But eventually somebody just decided to put it on the desk, and something good happened. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's this new statue of this fat, ugly guy. Maybe that's the reason why. It's a good luck charm. And before you know it, the good luck charm became a religion, became a philosophy, became an ideology. And that is the reason, Rabotai Karim, Avraham Avinu had to use his wisdom and had 400 chapters to the Tractate of Avodah Zara. While many people fight against the Talmud, fight against the oral Torah, what they don't realize is that what caused Avraham to succeed, the tool that he used to succeed, to help people become monotheistic, is the oral Torah. His major focus was on the Tractate of Avodah Zara, of idol worship. Why? Because there were so many different types of idols in those days that Avraham Avinu had to become an expert in every type of idol, every type of idolatry, in order to show people how it's fake, how it's nonsense. The same thing as the Sanhedrin had to become experts in everything and speak all languages in order for them to become members of the Sanhedrin. Why? Because if somebody comes with a case, they cannot rely on an interpreter to tell them what this guy is saying. Maybe the interpreter is wrong. Maybe he misinterpreted. Maybe somebody's paying him off. So every one of the members of the Sanhedrin had to know all of the languages, including the languages of plants, the languages of trees, the languages of animals, as well as languages of people. The wisdom that was required to be part of the Sanhedrin was second to none. Avraham Avinu had to use his wisdom that was superior to Shlomo Melech's. The wisdom of Avraham was superior to Shlomo Melech's. That's what the Gemara says. Two people were superior in wisdom to Shlomo Melech, which was Avraham and Moshe. One more will be, which is the Mashiach. But other than that, Shlomo Melech was higher in wisdom than everybody else. But here we see that Avraham Avinu had to use the knowledge he had about all types of filth in order to delve into the filth with the people, in order to show them that it's fake, that it's wrong. This also answers the people that have questions about, how does a rabbi speak on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook? This is what you need to do to help people leave the filth. How are you going to reach them if you're not willing to bring the information to the places that they're at? If they're over the internet, then you have to be on the internet. Of course, you don't do what they do on the internet. You don't do what they do in their places. But you have to use whatever tools HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you in order to publicize his name, in order to save people. That's the difference between Avraham and Noach. Noach was not willing to leave his four walls. Avraham went everywhere. In fact, from there we also learn that Avraham made sure to give shiurim in different places. When he was not able to give a shiurim, his servant Eliezer would give the shiur, would give the lecture. And this was not only with Avraham. At Parashat Vayekel. Parashat Vayekel, we learned that Moshe Rabbeinu followed suit, as was the command of Hashem, where the Torah says, Vayakel Moshe, that Moshe assembled. This is the only place in the Torah, it says the Yalkut Shimoni, that I saw in Nachat Shalti, in Sefer Nachat Shalti, and he brings the Yalkut Shimoni, where it says that this is the only parasha in the entire Torah where it says that Am Yisrael assembled. Because Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, make large assemblies to give discourses, to give shiurim on the laws of Shabbat and other laws, so that future generations will learn from you and do the same thing in every congregation that they have. Get the community to come to one place, to gather, so you can teach them Torah, teach them my laws. But this was already started even before Moshe Rabbeinu, by Avraham Avinu. But Avraham Avinu wasn't teaching them whatever he's interested in. Avraham Avinu was teaching them what they were interested in order to get to what they needed to know, which was certainly what he was interested in. And everyone recognized, as a result of these teachings, the secret of the world, and they started forsaking the pleasures of human beings, the things that caused them to abandon God in previous generations. As the prophet Yechezkel says in chapter 33, verse 24, Echad haya ke'Avraham, there was only one Avraham. Avraham was one of a kind. Not only one of a kind that there's nobody like him, but Avraham was literally by himself. He had every excuse in the world to justify just staying at home, being depressed, being in a cave by himself, leave me alone. I'm doing my best just to survive, like some people say. I'm doing my best to survive. Avraham Avinu had every excuse. But because he didn't use those excuses, Avraham went out and started doing Kiruv, started distributing information, started giving shiurim. Little by little, people realized that according to the truth that Avraham was teaching them, he resembled an angel, while they resembled animals. His behavior was the behavior of angels, of righteous people. Their behavior was more similar to animals. Their morality was in the level of animals. Their ideology was in the level of animals. And they said, we don't want to be animals. We want to be humans, just like God created us. And they started basking in the flow of wisdom, learning 400 chapters of the Tractate of Avodah Zara that was taught to them by Avraham and his wisdom. And Avraham was not alone in doing this. Avraham was converting the men, and Sarah was converting the women. Avraham did not go and give a regular shiur Torah to a bunch of women, which I'm not really sure why. There are some rabbis out there that do this, where they have a regular group of women that they give a lecture to. There's no permission to do such a thing. If you're going to give an occasional shiur to a random group of women, yes, you can do that, especially if you bring your wife or it's a one-time thing. But to give a regular lecture for the same group of women every week or every day or something like that, you're never going to find any posek to allow such a thing. But there are people that do it. Avraham Avinu didn't. Why? He knew that despite the fact that he was wise, righteous, and everything was going good on his ideology, on his spirituality, on his servitude of God, you can never trust yourself when it comes to morality. So yes, if the woman comes to the lecture, and there's a bunch of men, but there's also women on their side, no problem. But if there's a women's lecture that is needed on a regular basis, Sarah Imenu, she's going to take care of that one. Once in a while, Avraham will show up and be a guest speaker. But on a regular basis, Sarah Imenu. Now, Rabotai, how do we move forward from Avraham? Okay, Avraham was one of a kind. And what happened then? The Chazon Ish finalizes this book with the following and says, and since then, since Avraham made this mesirut nefesh, this sacrifice to publicize the Torah under all costs, the learning of Torah has not ceased. Despite all the inquisitions, the pogroms, the destruction of communities by the anti-Semites, year after year, generation after generation, always fighting against the Torah, still the Torah has not ceased. There's always going to be Jews studying Torah in different places. Why? Because of the original sacrifice that Avraham Avinu made. And Avraham passed this to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak to Yaakov, and Yaakov studied for 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever, and passed this Torah to his sons, and Yaakov Avinu to his sons, and went down to Egypt, where the Shekhinah went down with them. Meaning that the Jewish nation merited to have the Shekhinah. They saw things, they heard things, they elevated themselves above and beyond anything else out there. But it wasn't without difficulty. It wasn't without extraordinary sacrifice. Now, Rabotai Karim, many times when people are talking about anti-Semitism, which has become a disaster in recent days, usually when people are talking about anti-Semitism, they are referring to the Nazis, they're referring to the Nazis from Europe, the Nazis from the Middle East, the Nazis from America, all types of people that are anti-Semites. But there's a mistake. There's a mistake. Just like Rabbeinu Avraham Feldman said in his letter, those anti-Semites that you're looking at on the news, in the media, they're not your enemy. You are. What do you mean you are? The Jews are the enemy? Yes. Your conquerors, your destroyers will come from within you. Okay, fine, we cause each other problems, but what about anti-Semitism? No. The biggest anti-Semites are Jews. How so? This chidush I learned from my dear Rabbi Ephraim today, and literally this is like a treasure hidden in plain sight. Here the Chazon Ish is telling us, Avraham Avinu passed his teachings, his learnings to Yitzchak. Yitzchak to Yaakov. Yaakov is the grandson of Avraham. And Yaakov studied for 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem and Evel. All of us knew this. All of us have heard this 500 times. Every year you hear this at least once. When you read the parasha, Yaakov Avinu learned in yeshiva for 14 years. The yeshiva of Shem and Evel. Who is the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva of Shem and Evel? Shem. What did Yaakov do there? Learn Torah. Meaning that if you are one of those people in the Zionist newspaper, religious or otherwise, that is publicizing filthy things like this picture that says that the Torah scholars should become soldiers instead of ones that take advantage of the soldiers, as what they're portraying here is. If you are against the Jewish people learning and dedicating their entire life to learning Torah, then you are anti-Shem. You're anti the yeshiva of Shem. You're against Shem. Why? He is the original Rosh Yeshiva, where Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov, our father, learned in his yeshiva. When you are anti-Shem, you're anti-Semite, because that's where the Semite comes from the name Shem. Anti-Shemi is anti-Semite in Hebrew. So anyone that wants to use the anti-Semite card against the Gentiles, against the Nazis, against whoever is in the news and whoever is not in the news, in politics or otherwise, should do a little bit more homework on their own anti-Semitism and check if they themselves are not anti-Semitic against the Torah. Because, after all, what makes us Jews if it's not the Torah? You're not a Jew because of the place you were born. There are Jews all over the world. You're not a Jew because of the food you eat, as there are plenty of people around the world that eat the same types of foods. You're not a Jew because of the way you look, because there are certainly people that look like Jews and there are certain people that are not. There's no Jewish look. Jews come in all walks and sizes. Tall, short, black, white, yellow, brown. There is no Jewish look. While many think the typical Jewish look is like a, American, Ashkenazi, European look, the reality is there are many Jews that don't look like that. There are Jews that are black. There are Jews that are look like the people from India. There are Jews that look like people from different parts of Asia, like China. There are Jews that look Middle Eastern, like myself. There are literally Jews of all shapes and sizes. What makes all of us Jews is not the look. It's not the food. And you can't even say it's your mother. Why? Because the only thing that makes it due to your mother is because of the Torah that says that. It's not because your mom told you you're Jewish and therefore you're Jewish. Because a lot of people say their mom told them a lot of things. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily always true. The Torah said, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. If you converted to Judaism Orthodox, you're Jewish. So, in essence, when a person is fighting against anti-Semitism, they should at the very least check if they themselves are not anti-Semitic, if they themselves are not against the yeshiva of Shem, the Semite yeshiva, because that is what makes us Jewish. Now, what kept us Jewish, Rabotai? You see, after Yaakov Avinu studied in the yeshiva of Shem for 14 years, he had to go down to Egypt. He had to go down to America. He had to go down to Poland. He had to go down to Ukraine. He had to go down to Russia. He had to go down to Brazil. He had to go down to all types of places that are not Israel. That there's assimilation everywhere. That there is immorality. That there is all types of things that are against the Torah. But he had to make sure that we stay loyal to the Torah. And therefore Yaakov Avinu commanded his son, Yehudah, go down there first, build me a yeshiva, and then we'll figure out where we're going to live. Because the yeshiva is what's going to keep us loyal to God. The Torah is what's going to keep us loyal to God, not the house. Not whether we have 2 floors or 3 floors, not whether we have a 1-car garage or a 4-car garage, not whether we have a really nice food section in the local supermarket that has kosher products. No. What's going to keep us loyal to God is if we have a place to learn Torah in peace. So go build that first. Yehuda did it. And Yehuda fulfilled a couple of mitzvot there. One, he built the yeshiva. But two, he fulfilled the mitzvah that even the Gentiles have to fulfill, which is honoring the parents. Now the Torah says that honoring the parents is a big deal, especially for the Jewish people. So much so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises that if you honor your parents, He'll give you a gift in this world, which is a long life. Who doesn't want a long life? Even people that are suffering want a long life. Nobody wants to die. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you honor your parents, I'll give you a long life. Now, for those that need a little bit of chizuk when it comes to the laws of the Torah and seeing how they come into real life, here's a real story. A story that happened about 80 years ago. The year 1939. So about 85 years ago, to be more precise. This story was publicized in a sefer called Achat Sha'alti by Rav Zilberstein and his Talmid, who really addresses a lot of extraordinary questions that show you how without knowledge of a Torah you'll never arrive at the right conclusion. Rav Erez Chazani, who was a Talmid Muvak of Rav Zilberstein, wrote many books. This is one of them. And here he tells a story that he heard directly from the person in the story. A person by the name of Moshe Aptergut, who lived in America. Correction, this was heard originally by Rav Zev Roth, who heard from Moshe Aptergut, who's in the story. What's the story? As we said, the mitzvot in the Torah are important. But many times people think that they're important when they're convenient. Reb Moshe says, in 1939, the German Nazis, Yimach Shimam V'Zichram, invaded the village of Ivra, located in Sanz, in Galicia. And soon, as they entered the village, they sought out the Rav of the city and informed them that they wished to make his beard into a broom. Obviously, the entire town is in panic. They all realize this is just going to go from bad to worse. And the next announcement confirmed it when the Nazis, Yimach Shimam, said that the entire village has to come to the square. Everyone is being deported. As this was happening, people were packing, people were running wild, trying to salvage whatever they can, take with them whatever they can in a very, very short period of time. The atmosphere at the house of Aptergut was very different. His father says to Reb Moshe, Moshe, bring me my Shabbos shirt. So Moshe, puzzled by the strange request of why his father is asking for the special shirt that he has for Shabbat. You're supposed to have special clothing that you only wear for Shabbat. But why now, when the Nazis are here, and it's very likely that people are going to die? It's very likely that tragedy is around the corner. Moshe thought in his mind, why? But he didn't say a word. He went to go get the shirt. Within a few seconds, his father said, Moshe, heat up the iron and iron the shirt. And don't forget to starch the collar. Again, Moshe couldn't understand why it was so important to get the shirt, to iron the shirt, to starch the shirt, the Shabbat shirt, right now. as his father lost his mind from the fear and anxiety of what's happening here. But unlike, unfortunately, people today that don't have any respect whatsoever to their parents or to anyone other than themselves, Moshe did not say a word. Naturally, he's a kid. He thought some things, but he didn't say a word. He did what his father bid him to do. His father, shortly after, placed another request. Moshe, bring the shoe polish and shine my Shabbat shoes and make sure to get the corners nice and black. Today, many people don't even know what shining shoes is. To shine their father's shoes? Unheard of. Moshe, shine the shoes. But not just any shine. Not a quick shine because we're in a hurry. Shine it really, really good, pristine. Again and again, Reb Moshe's father kept asking him for different things. And deep down, Moshe couldn't help but wonder why his father wanted him to do all of this, with the Nazis' decrees hanging over their head. Chore after chore, task after task, his father was standing up tall and in a loud voice, telling him what to do, until he eventually stood up and said the following words that his son will never forget. Reb Moshe's father says as follows: soon we will be deported by the Nazis. We're all worried about the future. We don't know what will happen to us. Now, as the angels of death and destruction hover over us, most people are busy gathering things for the journey, whether food or clothing or gold or silver. But I have just given you the greatest and most precious gift of all. I have given you the Torah's command of kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, honor your father and your mother, in order that your days be lengthened. Then his father pointed to his son and said, my beloved son, you will live. And so he did. And Reb Moshe's house didn't just learn Torah. They lived the Torah with complete clarity of what is right and wrong at all times, despite the pressure, despite the evil, despite the horror, despite the abyss that we're looking into. His father knew that the Torah promised in the name of God that if you honor your parents, you will have a long life. So I must give my son this gift right here, right now. If my chinuch, my education to my child until now has been based on the Torah, he will succeed in this task. But if my teachings was not based on the Torah, we've already failed. And therefore, when his father gave him these strange tasks of the shirt and the shoes and the different things that seemed irrelevant, the test was, will you honor me during this time, during this moment, when it doesn't make sense, when it doesn't seem logical? Or will you start questioning me? Will you start arguing with me? Will you start saying, but I don't feel like it. Maybe somebody else can do it. Maybe it's not necessary. Will you start telling me about your opinion of what you should do? Or will you simply listen and honor your father just like the Torah commanded us to? And when Moshe did, he fulfilled the mitzvah, and his father then knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that his son will live. No matter what the Nazis want, no matter what the Nazis do, the Torah promised that you will live, because you honored your father, and therefore you will live. And Reb Moshe lived many, many years and is still alive at the time the story was written, just a few years ago. with countless grandchildren and families. Baruch Hashem ishtabach shimo la'ad. You see, Rabotai Yekarim, learning Torah is wonderful, but it's not as wonderful as living Torah. When you live Torah, everything is clear. Everything is understandable. Even the things you don't understand, you understand that you don't need to understand everything right this second, because everything is under control from the hand above that runs everything. And who are you to question it? Avraham Avinu made sure that his descendants never empower anything other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not money, not fame, not material in any way. That they believe in the one and only God. His children followed suit and made sure that their children do. Despite the enemies, near and far. Yaakov knew that if we're going to go and survive in Egypt, we have to build the yeshiva. Because that's how I survived the house of Lavan. That's how I survived against Esav. That's how Levi survived. Levi, Rabotai, 210 years we were in Egypt. Levi is the only one that remains in the Bet Midrash learning Torah, even though Paro enticed him like he did all of the others, with money, with wealth, with reputation, with fame. Come work for the majesty, come work for the government, come work for this, come work for that. The Levi tribe had no interest in anything other than continuing to learn the Holy Torah. They continued their dedication to learning Torah, and that's why they were never enslaved. The rest of the tribes were enslaved. And therefore, the Rambam writes in Ilchot Shemitah v'Yovel, in chapter 13, Halakha number 13, this lesson about Levi is not just for the Levi tribe. Rather, not only the Levi tribe, but any one of the inhabitants of the world whose spirit generously motivates him and understands with his wisdom to set himself aside and stand before God to serve him and minister to him and to know God, proceeding justly as God made him, removing from his neck the yoke of the many reckonings which people seek. He is sanctified as Holy of Holies, Kodesh Kodashim. God will be his portion and heritage forever and will provide what is sufficient for him in this world, like he provides for the priests and the Levites, the Kohanim and the Levim. And thus, David HaMelech declared in the book of Psalms, chapter 16, verse 5, God is the lot of my portion, you are my cup, you support my lot. Here, the Rambam is explaining that the Levi tribe did not only save themselves, but their merit of staying loyal to the Torah goes beyond what they did for themselves. It goes for the entire nation. They opened up the ticket, just like Avraham Avinu opened up monotheism, opened up giving shiur Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu followed suit. Until today we give shiur Torah. Until today we teach the one and only God. The Levi tribe gave the gift where if you learn Torah, you'll get not only protection, but you also get sustenance. But again, this is complete dedication to the Torah. This is abandoning all of the distractions from the outside. In fact, in the new Sefer by our own dear Rabbi Ephraim, that's on the way and going to be available BeEzrat HaShem in the next month and a half or so, the Drasha Shvuit in Parashat Bamidbar. At the end of the parasha, Rabbi Ephraim says that those parents that want their kids to be like Shevet Levi, to be Torah scholars, to be successful Torah scholars, not just people that just warm up the seat, to be successful Torah scholars, to be someone that is like Shevet Levi, they have to do what Shevet Levi did. They have to seclude themselves. They cannot be with everybody, doing everything what everybody else does, and yet have the results of Shevet Levi. Just like Shevet Levi excluded themselves from the business meetings, excluded themselves from the sports events, excluded themselves from all of the material aspirations that the rest of the tribes went after, Shevet Levi got special protection. Shevet Levi got special blessings. You want your son to be like Shevet Levi? You have to do what Shevet Levi did. You have to do what the Rambam is saying to do. Complete dedication to learning Torah without distraction. And this, of course, is not for everybody. This, of course, is not something that everybody can do themselves, but certainly you could help your kids do it. You could help a friend do it. You could help one of our Avrahim in our kollel do it. You may not be a Shevet Levi, but you can be partners with a Shevet Levi and thereby get the blessings of Shevet Levi. When you invest into one of the Avrahim in the kollel, every week, every month, on a regular basis, you invest for a month, you invest for 6 months, you invest, whatever you do, whatever you are providing to help the Avrahim learn Torah each month, even if you're not Shevet Levi, you get the benefits of Shevet Levi based on your commitment, based on your investment. Now, for those that have the means, for those that have the finances, it's never been easier to get the benefits of the world of Torah than today. But the excuses are that we live in a world of wicked people. We live in a world of distractions. And this is the point that we're going to finalize everything with. The Rambam writes in his Mishneh Torah, in Ilchot Ta'aniyot, that it's a positive biblical commandment to cry out and to sound out the trumpets in the event of any difficulty that arises which affects the community. These are the trumpets that we learn about in this week's parasha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had made for Moshe Rabbeinu. Those trumpets specifically were only allowed to be used at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Even Yeshua ben Nun was not allowed to use those trumpets. But the task and obligation of sounding a trumpet that there's something wrong is still an obligation to this day, just like the Rambam writes. Now a person is going to say, yeah, but there's something wrong in the synagogue. There's something wrong in the community. There's something wrong in the business. There's something wrong there. Yes. And there's a bunch of wicked people. Yes. What am I going to do? I'm alone. Yes. You're in good company. Because there's nothing new under the sun. Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, all of our forefathers dealt with the same exact difficulty. Avraham had to deal with Nimrod, most powerful person on the planet, a warrior, extraordinarily wealthy, and a man-made idol. People worshipped him. Avraham had a criminal record, was poor and alone. But he had Hashem on his side. Yaakov Avinu, Yitzchak, they weren't alone. Like Avraham, but they certainly had similar difficulties. What are you dealing with? The missionaries of the day? The Ishmaelim? The idol worshippers? The atheists? Yaakov and Yitzchak also had to deal with it. Ishmael himself was there, proselytizing, getting people to follow him too. And although he did tshuva at some point in his life, his descendants certainly did not, especially the ones that united with Esav and created Amalek. Amalek came from the combination of Esav and Ishmael. Esav and his heresy, idolatry, and murder was also there. Missionizing didn't start today. Idolatry didn't start today. Ishmael and Esav were competing for customers against our forefathers. But that wasn't it. Even at the time of Avraham trying to teach, he wasn't the only one trying to teach. Ham and Yefet and Canaan were also trying to teach. Not exactly in the yeshiva of Shem, but in other places. So Canaan was trying to teach. Ham was trying to teach, like the Hebrew Israelites of today. That's Ham. Canaan was trying to teach. You know, it's like all of these people with the strange behavior, worshipping cows. That's Canaan. But then there's all the gurus that find themselves being mystical too. The Balaks of the world, the Bilams of the world. Moshe Rabbeinu had to deal with them too. And certainly, Balak and Bilam won over 24,000 Jews and got them to destroy their lives. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't give up. Just because 24,000 died doesn't mean we close up the shop and give up on everyone. Moshe Rabbeinu continued fighting. But certainly, his fight wasn't over. It wasn't enough that you had the Ishmaelim with their dawah, the Christians with their missionizing, the Esav, the Hebrew Israelites, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the man-made, self-proclaimed gurus, the Canaan, the Ham, all of those, that was there. The Balak, the Bilam, they were there. The worst of them all, the ones that caused the most damage, were inside. Korach, the Tanva Aviram, Yerovam ben Nevat, Doega Adomi, Achitofel, these were all Jews. Yoshke, these were all Jews. Korach was a prophet, but he went against God and Moshe's servant. Korach convinced 250 biggest rabbis in the world to follow him in this heresy, like Manis Friedman does, like Goldberg, Ephraim does, like Ephraim Mervis does, like all of the Reshaim that convince decent people to follow them and create this fictional peace and harmony that makes money. Korach did the same thing. The Tanva Aviram did the same thing. fortifying relationships with decent people and turning them into co-conspirators of evil. That happened then, it's happening now. Big, famous names that have their ego so high up in the air, they decide to change the Torah. Like some of the names we just mentioned. They're nothing new. Yerovam ben Nevat was the Gedol Ador in his time, was an extraordinary Torah scholar, but eventually turned himself into something that was worse than a dead animal in the street because of his arrogance. But he got a bunch of people to follow him, to worship idols, to commit immorality, to do all types of heinous crimes against God. Certainly, he said, it's in the name of God, but obviously a different God. This is like those people today that think that they're Torah scholars but tell you to start taking hallucinogen drugs or all types of new ways of worshiping God. There's nothing new. As the Chazon Ish has taught us throughout this entire series for the last 4.5 years, we know exactly what the instructions from God are. We know exactly what the instructions from the sages are of what the Jewish ideology is supposed to be, how we are supposed to behave, how we are supposed to think. We may have different customs between communities. We may have different traditions between different communities. But the overall ideology is the same. The overall Torah is the same. In fact, it's not only the same, says the Chazon Ish. It's not only the same where if you follow it, you'll turn to be an angel among men. You'll look like men, but you'll really be like angels if you dedicate yourself to Torah and become one of these Torah scholars. But even more than that, the Chazon Ish famously said, the Mishnah, that is used for a different purpose, but he used it for this. When it comes to ideology, when it comes to the basic foundations of a Torah, if you see somebody with or without a beard, with or without popularity, with or without support from other rabbis or institutions or whatever, if you see somebody and they come tell you something new, all of a sudden, 3,000 years have passed, no one has ever said it until now. According to this yo-yo today, he says God needs you. Or he says that you could take drugs to elevate yourself, to be closer to God. Or that it's okay to violate Shabbat as long as you're going to synagogue. Or that all of a sudden Steve can marry Dave. All of a sudden, all types of new things. Like women can join the army. Or that the army is what's going to save the Jews and not the Bet Midrash where people learn Torah. The Chazon Ish, in so many words, for the last 4.5 years has taught us what the Jewish ideology looks like, but he also summarized all of it in a single sentence where he says, Chadash asur min Torah. New is forbidden according to the Torah. If your traditions, your customs, your behavior, your understanding is in line with what the Torah and its sages have said for the last several thousand years, you're in good company of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Yaron, David Shlomo. And you should publicize it to as many places as possible, just like they did. But if your tradition, your ideas, your customs are new, they're not part of what we've had for the last few thousand years, it's asur, according to the Torah. It's forbidden, according to the Torah. Why? Our Torah is the same Torah, and it never changes. This, Rabotai Yekarim, is the ultimate lesson that we must take home from this series, from this lecture, for this time, because there's going to be a lot of false prophets in every corner, more than what we already see now. But they're not new. Ishmael, Bilam, Esav, Balak, Korach, all of these people, all of these different heretics, idol worshippers, missionaries, they come in every generation. Only thing they change is their name. The strategy is still the same, getting you away from the Torah. If you want to get close to the Torah and stay in that path, you have to stick to what Torah has said and run away from anything new. Because you don't even know enough about the old. And the old, once you get to know it, it feels even better than new. Thank you very much for learning with me. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless each and every single one of you that has learned with me today and throughout this entire series. And may a special blessing come upon each and every single person that has learned every one of these lectures together with us, whether it's today or tomorrow or years from now. But certainly to have this blessing where you will be able to have extra strength from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to fulfill the words of the Chazon Ish that you've learned, and to have your children fulfill the words of the Chazon Ish, and to have a true understanding and clarification and strength to go in the path of our extraordinary sages, all of those that we've discussed, that we've learned from, that we submit to their extraordinary Torah that they teach, all in this for the sake of honoring, glorifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. Thank you very much for learning with me. Anyone that wants to support and help our organization can donate on our website, bhtorah.org or BeEzrat BeEzrat HaShem, we will announce soon what the new series will be. But for now, let us celebrate and enjoy this siyum of this series, this Sefer Emunah V'Bitachon, which we've, Baruch Hashem, certainly believe in. We brought nachat to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and lots of nachat to the Chazon Ish. Thank you very much. Tizku Mitzvot Rabot. Kol Tov.
אני מברך את הרבנים, הרב ירון ראובן, הרב אפרים כחלון, ראשי ארגון בעזרת השם, שהלכו בפי עליון, שעלו מעלה, יהיה להם ברכה והצלחה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא בישועות ליבם לטובה ולברכה, שבכל מה שיפנו ישכילו ויצליחו, יזכרו לעשות כאלה וכאלה, הודיעו תורה לאדירה, אמן ואמן.